Can K-pop overcome crisis in regards to things like stagnation and a declining global interest? This discussion is primarily based on the continued decline of album sales last year going into this year that many people forecast as the end of K-pop. My short, non-industry expert answer is yes, K-pop can overcome crisis, absolutely. In fact, I think we're already on our way there, which is what I want to talk with you about today. In 2025, K-pop has fully globalized, thanks to the groundwork of groups like BTS and Blackpink, alongside other cultural touchstones such as 2021 Squid Game and, of course, this year's K-pop Demon Hunters. I would argue that Korean pop music no longer feels novel to global audiences simply for being K-pop, right? It's not really surprising to see a K-pop act cross into the West, and with that kind of shift, a kind of problem comes into focus. Listeners, on average, are no longer impressed by aesthetics alone. They expect artistry, conceptual depth, and genuine innovation. This gap between expectation and delivery is what I believe feels like a quote crisis in the industry right now. We're at a stage where global fans demand things the industry has historically struggled to provide and maintain: self-production, conceptual cohesion, and bold experimentation. I believe that's why groups like Stray Kids, 17, Idol, and BTS, artists who compose and conceptualize much of their work, garner so much outsized loyalty and success. Similarly, groups like ATEEZ, TXT, and NMIXX attract listeners through narrative arcs and lore, while artists like RM and August D, Artemis, and Eve push the boundaries of pop music altogether. I believe these figures thrive precisely because they bring individuality into an industry that often prices polish and formula. These stakes of just how important artistic identity is in this new stage of globalization is becoming clear. I look at aespa's cyber grunge aesthetic or New Jeans Y2K-infused brands. Both are recognizable, cohesive, and conceptually robust. Their work feels both self-contained and authentic, even though the material is largely outsourced. This is what separates innovation from confusion. When identity grounds experimentation, it thrives. The rise of soloists like Eve further proves how expectations are actively shifting. Her collaboration with Pink Pantheress not only expands her sonic palette, but also places her in dialogue with the broader global pop landscape. People talk about it a lot when it comes to Eve, but really for K-pop, Eve is so quietly radical. An idol asserting herself as an artist with a distinctive voice, able to cross cultural and genre boundaries while maintaining her identity. Moves like this signal to fans and to the industry that artistry matters, that K-pop performers are no longer just idols but creators expected to hold their own alongside global peers. Sameness continues to be the ultimate killer in K-pop. As we've seen throughout this past year or so, over-reliance on formulas and general trend chasing stifles innovation. As counterintuitive as it sounds, overly polished and safe products lose commercial resonance in an era where authenticity sells. This is the problem with K-pop that I personally identify today, but that doesn't mean the industry is doomed forever. We're simply in an awkward transition phase where global expectations outpace industry norms. This lull period isn't a failure, in my opinion. It is the growing pains of K-pop adapting to higher artistic demands. K-pop has always thrived on pop culture and trends, and it will continue to. But now, survival depends on cohesion, identity, and innovation. This will likely not yield another colossal Hallyu wave overnight, though. I believe novelty was the key factor to the late 2010s Hallyu wave boom. The novelty has now worn off, but the fact that the industry continues to find new footholds, thinking obviously about the continued impact of K-pop Demon Hunters, shows its staying power, right? Rather than a crisis of fading interest, I think what we're witnessing is actually a shift toward demanding more from idols as artists. The industry is not fully there yet. Some groups are suffering more than others, but given K-pop's history of adaptation, it almost certainly will rise to the occasion. This is my non-industry expert answer. I think the problem continues to be one of identity first and foremost, and feelings of authenticity as an extension of that. Selfishly, I'm most invested in concept work in K-pop. It sits at the same table as conversations about identity, and so I want to use the rest of this video to highlight some of my favorite groups from a conceptual perspective and how that helps to bridge the gap between what seems to be expected of K-pop going forward. I think a lot of groups are already on the right path. When it comes to Islet, I think they succeed conceptually because they represent a reimagining of youthful freshness in K-pop, but with a modernized, very self-aware perspective. They don't merely mirror the teenage dream concepts that have been staples in the industry before. They present themselves as a slightly whimsical collective, leaning into playful surrealism and escapism. I think this concept resonates because it mirrors a generation's need for both relatability and fantasy, a reminder that youth can and is messy, silly, and bright, but also self-aware and experimental. Musically, this translates into tracks that blend very bright pop structures with unexpected flourishes, playful synths, airy strings like we see in their most recent single, and often a quirky sound design or shifts in tempo that surprise the listener without breaking immersion. Rather than following rigid formulas, Eyelid's music often feels like it skips around unexpectedly, which reinforces their alive and in-the-moment personas. This kind of lawless vibrance in their sound makes them feel distinct in a K-pop landscape where polished perfection can sometimes lead toward predictability. aespa. Oh my gosh, aespa. In the last 2 years, aespa has leaned into a conceptual rebrand that softens the overtly sci-fi, I Member versus Black Mamba mythology to instead frame their music around more accessible but still very futuristic themes of self-empowerment and personal duality. Rather than abandoning their lore, they've refracted it. Songs like Drama, Supernova, and Armageddon still echo the Kwangya metaverse backdrop, but they channel it through much sharper production choices and more straightforward pop narratives. This shift has made their music feel less bound to very dense exposition and more like high-impact statements of identity, allowing aespa to be read simultaneously as these futuristic idols and also relatable performers. Tracks like Armageddon and Supernova show a willingness to push into abrasive, genre-bending territories while still centering their vocals and choreography as the human core, anchoring this high-concept aesthetic. This balance between the alien and the intimate has allowed aespa to distinguish themselves as one of K-pop's most forward-thinking groups ever, proving that they can evolve beyond their original lore while still keeping the futuristic spark that made them stand out in the first place. Genuinely a rebrand for the history books. Artemis blends storytelling, emotional nuance, and avant-garde presentation to redefine what K-pop idol artistry can be from the ground up. Conceptually and more recently, they've taken the Greek myth of Icarus and reframed it as a story of rebirth and self-discovery. Icarus becomes a metaphor for healing rather than a cautionary tale about hubris, where falling doesn't mean failure but a chance at transformation. This bold fusion of narrative and visual performance and sound design positions Artemis not just as a girl group but as authors in the realm of K-pop, refusing easy consumption in favor of richly textured, emotionally compelling artistry. I do have to apologize that I didn't include them in my best K-pop list, but in a roundabout way, this speaks to the effectiveness of their commitment to artistry. I didn't think to include Icarus because I simply don't really listen to it as much as other K-pop songs this year, but that doesn't detract from its value. It's a testament to their storytelling even above commercial appeal. There's value even in that. I could keep going on. I think there are many groups rising to the growing demands of global acceptance in their own unique ways. Again, it's just kind of an awkward in-between phase we're existing in right now, but honestly, I'm finding value in that. I'm having a good time despite some glaring problems with oversaturation and sameness. Artists and labels struggling with identity certainly harm brands commercially, but from a consumer's perspective, it's really interesting to see how these groups are embracing change in their own unique ways. Struggling to find creative footing and a realized identity is part of the artistic process. And again, doesn't just look one specific way. It's really easy to enjoy K-pop with this mindset. Everything is a part of the artistic process, both the high and low moments. It's fine to not like a song or think a comeback overall is ineffective. That is also a part of the artistic process. K-pop groups who struggle with cohesion and identity are not doomed forever, is what I mean to say. I believe the same is true for K-pop as a whole. This lull phase in terms of commercial reception doesn't mean the industry is on its way to ruin. This is what I think. Please let me know what you think about this. Do you perceive the crisis in conversations about K-pop in a different way? What are groups and/or projects that you think rise to meet these growing expectations globally, and things like that? Yes, thank you for watching this. If you did, subscribe if you want to, and I will see you next time.